Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to an art video. So just recently, you may have seen in one of my posts, or just from me talking in general on different social media sites, that I was at university. What you may not know, or maybe you do, is that I was studying biology, and my particular interest was in marine biology. But just to sort of, do a fun little thing with that, I decided that for the art video today, we're going to be heading over to the tide pools. We're going to be heading over to the tide pools, and we're going to be taking a look at some creatures. But we're not just gonna be drawing little animals. I do love me some animals. I do love me some plants. But I'm actually gonna be taking a couple of little organisms, and I'm gonna be turning them into monsters, like maybe video game monsters or something like that. I don't know if they'd necessarily be boss monsters, but I thought it'd be neat to make them enemies in a video game. So let's get to it. So, since I had a couple of little field guides for tide pools and stuff, I figured I'd choose one of those and just randomly pick some organisms out of them. I decided to go with the one that's slightly thicker. I didn't need this one for class. I actually bought it by mistake when I was trying to get the other one, but I figured I'd keep them both. It's called The New Beachcomber's Guide to the Pacific Northwest, and it's by J. Duan Sept. And then I hopped into Google to pick a number randomly out of the pages in the book, and we landed on this page that has the northern rock barnacle and the thatched barnacle. And we also got this page that has a flat acid leaf and stringy acid leaf seaweed. And so I figured I would just pick one of the organisms off each of those pages. I didn't really consider the fact that it might choose like some kind of algae like seaweed instead of like an animal, but I figured it'd be fun to just try to make something out of that as well. So I ended up going with the thatched barnacle, which is just a common name. The species name is Semibalanus caryopsis. And so I started with, it's going a little fast, but I started by drawing a few different concepts, a few different like, little ideations. The first one I thought was, because barnacles have like this outer shell, I think it might be a common thing for people not to even realize barnacles are alive. They're very much alive. In fact, they're types of arthropods, which is basically, it's a classification where in our taxonomic classification system for biology, it's a type of phylum. And I can actually read the description for arthropods as said in this book. Arthropods are claimed to be the most widespread group of creatures in the animal kingdom. Marine arthropods include barnacles, isopods, amphipods, shrimps, and crabs. All members of this large group, phylum Arthropoda, have jointed limbs, an exoskeleton, or a skeleton that covers their body like armor. So crustaceans, for example, if I'm not mistaken, they are a subphylum within Arthropoda. They could be a class, but I'm pretty sure they're a subphylum. So like crabs and all kinds of things, those are all considered arthropods. So my first thought was like, they're sort of armored on the outside, so that's why maybe I do an armored thing. But then I was like, I don't know if I want to do a suit of armor. I'm not great at armor design. And so another thing I was like, okay, wait a second. What if I utilize how they feed? So barnacles, when the tide goes out, like when it's in low tide, the barnacles, they stay closed. But when they're underwater, the way they feed is by filter feeding through these little tendrils that'll come out of this opening, like in the middle of their shell. And these little tendrils are called cirri, and they're used to filter feed. So basically, my idea was to turn the cirri into like arms, like tendrils, like tentacles, like weird hands. But I couldn't find a reference for the cirri that this particular species of barnacle has, so I just referenced other ones, and I even watched like a little video to see how they move and stuff, just to get the creative juices flowing. And you can see with the drawing, I sort of took elements from a few different of those concepts that I had. I really liked this one where it was just like a barnacle on the back of a big hermit crab. I don't know why it entranced me having it on a crab. I know I didn't need to add any kind of other organism to it, but I thought it would be fun, so I slapped the barnacle on a big old hermit crab. I thought maybe his shell would be maybe like a rock or something instead of an actual shell, but I think it still looks shell-like and kind of rocky, so it fits. But yeah, and then my idea was just like this like kind of like a masked person, maybe not with like actual like human anatomy, because at first I was considering drawing human anatomy, and then I realized being like face down, ass up in this pose might be a little strange to look at. But I thought of turning like these sort of I forget if it has a name, but like where the sort of opening is on a barnacle shell into a face, or not a face, into a mask, basically, on this person. And I noticed with this species when I was looking at pictures, one part of that area of the shell actually has these two little things that stick out, kind of like horns or mandibles. I know they're not really that; they're just part of the shell. But I thought it would be cool to make them like part of like the jaw slash quote unquote mouth area of the mask. And then I decided to slap 4 of these Siri as like arms, because I thought it'd be cool. I was gonna do just 2 at first, as you could see, but I was like, let's add some more. Let's add to the creepy factor. I kind of wanted to make these like almost like Bloodborne or like Souls type monsters. Like, originally I was gonna do boss monsters, but then I was like, I don't know if I want to do bosses. Because as I was sketching them, I'm like, I don't know if these feel like boss monsters. Maybe with the big enough like scaling, if they're huge. But I don't know if they'd be actual boss monsters. Maybe mini bosses or something. But yeah, that was the kind of vibe I was going for. I slapped on some seaweed to be like hair. I just thought it would look neat because I felt like it was gonna be too empty if I just did like the head on top of like, because the body is pretty simplistic, as you can see, other than like the Siri on it. So I I thought I had to add a little bit of something. And yeah, I stuck to a very muted color palette for these as well. I usually like to go with like more vibrant colors, but this one, at first I was just gonna do it monochromatic. It was all just gonna be like very muted purples, but then I decided to change things up a little bit and make some of the tones different, which you can't see just yet. But yeah, like this is basically the first one. But while we're waiting for the video to catch up, I can read a little bit about that barnacle. Other names for this barnacle are the thatched acorn barnacle, the rock barnacle, the horse barnacle, and it's formally classified by a different species name called Balanus cariosus. The description that my book has is that the color is white to gray overall. Although when I looked it up, honestly, I found ones that were like more brown leaning as opposed to white. So I feel like, and it probably depends like if they've gotten like stained from something in nature, I guess. But they seemed like they could vary a little bit. And then in the description besides the color, it says a membranous, non-calcified base is present, and numerous downward pointing spines cover the steep walls of the uncrowded individuals. The walls of the shells are very thick and porous. They're about 2 inches or 5 centimeters in diameter, about 1.2 inches or 3 centimeters high, and they're usually like pretty crowded. Oh, that was in an uncrowded case when they're like on their own. When they're with other ones, they're usually about 1.4 inches or 3 to 5 centimeters in diameter and 4 centimeters high, 4 inches high, about 10 centimeters high. Their habitat is the rocks of exposed shorelines in the mid-intertidal zone to the shallow subtidal depths. Their range is from the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, Alaska, to California, and they're also located near Japan. And some like little notes that it also has in the book are the spines covering the walls of the barnacle give it a thatched look. This species often forms column-like shapes under crowded conditions, which make it more difficult to identify. The purple star is the main predator and often limits the species to which this barnacle is found. Females are known to brood their young over the winter months and release them when the spring arrives. Individuals can live for 10 to 15 years. That is a pretty long lifespan. I never knew how long barnacles lived, so I don't know about other ones, but that strikes me as pretty long-lived. They are hardy little guys. But yeah, I decided to keep this art style sort of like a messy, like it's you can tell that it's finished, but it's still just messy. The lines aren't super clean. It's very much a concept sketch. But yeah, that's what I have for this one. We just should wait for the speed paint to catch up a bit. I'm still not used to voicing over speed paints, so I do apologize. I forgot how long this took me to draw. I think it was, I remember I recorded it in 2 segments. It was like a 40-minute segment and an hour. So that was like an hour and 40 minutes to draw that one. And now for our next organism. My options were the flat acid leaf seaweed, Desmarestia ligulata, and the stringy acid leaf, which is Desmarestia viridis, viridis. Um, I honestly, at first, I was not sure how to approach doing a seaweed monster. My first thought was the that one plant monster from the swamp in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I'm like, I don't want to just rip that off. And also, I decided between those two species to go with the flat acid sea leaf, Desmarestia ligulata. And something I thought was cool that it's mentioned. I mean, maybe you can tell by the name, flat acid leaf. In this book, it mentions that the species secretes sulfuric acid when damaged, which can damage even its own tissue as well as other seaweeds. This causes dramatic color changes, and flat acid leaves often become established in areas where the giant perennial kelp is hard hit by winter storms. What I thought was interesting was the sulfuric acid bit. I thought that was super cool, and I'm like, if this was a monster I was fighting in a game, I feel like it should, involve acid in some way. Like, you damage it, and like it starts leaking acid or something like that. So I thought that would be kind of a cool concept to play with. What I ended up with is the sort of, I don't know why in my brain I'm like, yeah, we're just gonna be a bundle of seaweed, but like make it kind of almost like the characters from Journey, where they're kind of just like a hooded figure with like these thin little stick legs. But I played off of that. I tried to make it more. It does kind of look like a little bit of a Christmas tree, but that's okay. We won't worry about that. I was also a bit lazy with the seaweed in the main part of this because it's so many strings of seaweed. I was not going to draw each one of them to botanical like perfection. I'm not even that great at drawing plants. I do actually want to try to draw more botanical images because I'm not the best at drawing plants. But yeah, so this is like the basic, like the body of it, but I decided that because I liked the idea of it secreting sulfuric acid, I'm like, okay, what if I have like one of the tendrils kind of like raised up as an arm? Earlier you could see that like I was gonna draw like two arms, like just two normal arms. They weren't even gonna have seaweed on them. It was just gonna be two normal arms dripping acid, and I was like, this looks a little too silly. So I'm gonna make just like a tendril of the seaweed itself and try to make it almost like it got cut or something. I didn't draw it cut very convincingly, but as you'll see soon. But then I had it basically dripping sulfuric acid from it. And also on the mask that I added to it, because I wanted to do a little mask, I felt like I needed something, not just the seaweed itself. I didn't want to put too much detail on the legs. I did briefly consider like making it humanoid, like with more detail on the legs, or giving it like human arms or something, but I was like, I'm not feeling it for this one. But with the mask, I decided to put a symbol for like hazardous chemicals, because with anything like sulfuric acid or any chemicals in like a chemistry lab, you'll always see like warnings for the handling of them because they can be corrosive or they can have like toxic fumes or things like that. So I grabbed one. I like looked at some of those symbols, and I decided to just go with the symbol like exclamation point one. I forget what particular thing it is, but I do think it was fitting for sulfuric acid, whatever the case. And then you see like I'm coloring it. So this is a type of brown algae, but that doesn't necessarily mean the color itself is like full on brown. I saw like with different images of it, and you could see like when I had those two images up, sometimes it's more greenish and then sometimes it's more brownish. And then even the description, I don't know what color it changes, just that apparently, when it gets damaged, it has like a dramatic color change. So that's why I sort of did that, those like different colors with it. Yeah, so these are the two drawings side by side. I hope you enjoyed. I had fun doing this, honestly. I like doing character designs, and I like trying to do monster designs, though I haven't quite got them down yet. It's something I want to practice more. So I thought this would be a fun little challenge, and it would be, involving something that I am interested in, which, not that I never draw, not that I don't draw things that I'm interested in. I always do, of course, but yeah. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked them. See you next time.